Okay, it's time for 4.4 on multiplying polynomials. So we got to think back just a little bit to the product rule. Remember the product rule when we were doing the exponent rules? You might not remember by name, but I bet you remember it if you see it. Remember what m to the 6 times m to the third is? Oh, these are two powers with the same base. And if you're multiplying, what do? You keep the base the same, and you add the exponents. So 6 plus 3, you end up with m to the 9th. So the way we showed that algebraically was a to the m. That should not say plus. That's a major error there. Whoopsies. That should say times a to the m, n, equals a to the m plus n. Gosh, what a terrible start to the video. A mistake. I think I wrote down the rules here too. You might not need them, but you keep the base the same, just like I said, a, m, m, and you add the exponents. So even if you have more than two things multiplied together, look, we have 3 powers here we're multiplying. You do the same thing. We have x, and x as our base, so we keep the base the same, and we add the exponents. So what are we adding? We're adding 7 plus 1, remember that one has a 1, plus 3, and we end up with x to the 11th power. Okay, so you need to know that for what we're going to do today. So first thing we're going to do is learn how to multiply monomials together. And here's how you do it. You're going to multiply the coefficients together. Remember, coefficients are the numbers out front. If you want, I'll write that there. These are numbers in front of variables, basically. So for example, up here, we have no coefficients here. Down here we have a coefficient of 2 and a coefficient of 5, coefficient of -3 and a coefficient of -2. Okay, so you're going to multiply those together first, and then you're going to multiply the variables together. How are you going to do that? You're going to use the product rule, the thing we just reviewed right up here. And that's it. Okay? What you'll notice here, I should have written this somewhere. Actually, I'm going to add it right now. You do not need like terms. Remember when you added and subtracted, you had to have like terms, otherwise you couldn't add or subtract? Well, with multiplication and division, you don't need like terms. Like, look at the first one. 2x squared and 5x cubed. Those are not like terms. Doesn't matter. We just followed our 2 rules. So first rule, multiply the coefficients together. 2 and 5. Multiply those together, I get 10. Then you multiply the variables together, x squared and x cubed. Well, remember, they have the same base. We're using the product rule here. Same base stays the same, and we add together the exponents. We're adding together the 2 and the 3 to get 5. And that's it. Okay? So next one, coefficients are -3 and -2. When you multiply negative times a negative, you get a positive, and 3 times 2 is 6. Then you have x to the 4th and x to the 3rd. We add the exponents and keep the base the same, and there's our answer. So these are pretty fast, aren't they? Multiply the coefficients, 4 and -5. Well, it's just one negative, so our answer is going to be negative. 4 times 5 is 20. Now, you do one letter at a time. So the first one you look at is the a's. We have a squared and a cubed. Base stays the same, and add the exponents. 2 and 3 is 5. Now we do the b's. b1 times b squared. Keep the base the same, that's your b, and then add 1 and 2, and you get 3. Okay, we're multiplying 3 things together here. What are the coefficients? The coefficients are 10, -6, and 1. Remember, if you don't see a coefficient, there's a 1 there. So 10 times 1 is 10, and 10 times -6 is -60. Now we'll look at the m's. M, there's no m here. That's okay, just multiply these two together. So m squared times m to the 4th, if we add those exponents, we get m to the 6th. Now let's look at your n's. I have a 1 here, I have a 3 here, and a 4 there. Keep the base the same, I already wrote it down, and add the exponents. 1 plus 3 is 4, plus another 4 is 8. And that is how you multiply monomials together. Now, we're going to look at how do you multiply polynomials by monomials. But in order to do that, we have to review another thing that you've learned in a previous year. You learned this last year. It's the distributive property. I also called this mountains. Remember this? This 5 written out front of the bracket means 5 times m minus 3. And what we said last year is you're going to multiply 5 times m and 5 times negative 3. And you see you get these beautiful mountains showing up here with the sun rising maybe and some birds or whatever. Enough of that nonsense. Basically, you're just multiplying 5 times m and 5 times negative 3. In fact, you could write this as just like this. You could say 5 times m minus 5 times 3. Some people write it out like that. But most of us are lazy and we end up not doing that. Either way you do it, whether you write it out like I have here, or if you just look at the mountains and do it, you go 5 times m, which is 5m, and then 5 times negative 3, which is negative 15. Or when you write it down, it becomes minus 15. Alright, next one. Negative 4 times 8 and negative 4 times negative 2n. Make sure you always look at the signs in front. So again, I'm going to skip this step right here. I think most people do skip it. If you do want to write it, okay, I'm going to write it one more time. You'd go negative 4 times 8 and then negative 4 times negative 2n. That's how you'd write that. But I find some people get confused by that. Actually, I get kind of confused by that. I like just multiplying it right in one step. So what I do is negative 4 times 8 is negative 32. And then negative 4 times negative 2n, well, it's a negative times a negative, which makes a plus or a positive. And 4 times 2n is 8n. That's the distributive property. And you need to know that when you're multiplying a monomial by polynomial. See, here's our monomial, and we're multiplying it by a trinomial. Here's a monomial times a trinomial. Here's a monomial times a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-term polynomial. My goodness. And here's a trinomial times a monomial. So that's the idea here. Okay, so what are we going to do? You're going to multiply the monomial in front, well that's the 3m here, in front of the bracket by each monomial in the bracket. In other words, you're going to use the distributive property here, the mountains. So you have to multiply this 3m times the 5m cubed, 3m times the 2m squared, and 3m times the negative 4. And if I write it this way, 3m times 5m cubed, you can certainly write it this way, plus 3m times 2m squared. Now here you can either put plus 3m times negative 4, or you could put minus 3m times 4. This is why I don't actually like writing it out like this. I find people get confused, including me gets a little confused by this. The way I like doing it is just multiplying it and not write it down. Here's one of the rare times I'll tell you that I prefer not to write it down. So 3m times 5m cubed, well this is just like what we did on the other side when we're multiplying monomials times monomials, right? Now remember, there's a 1 right here. So 3m times 5m cubed. We multiply the coefficients, the 3 times 5, and we get 15. If it helps, you can also look here. 3 times 5 is 15. Then m to the 1 times m cubed, or if you're looking here, m to the 1 times m cubed. Keep the m the same and add the exponents, just like we did on the other side of the page. The only difference, now we're going to do it 2 more times. Now we're multiplying 3m to the 1 times positive 2m squared. So multiply the coefficients, 3 times 2, which is 6. And then m to the 1 times m to the 2. Keep the base the same. Add the 1 and 2, you end up at 3. Now you do it again. 3m times negative 4. Multiply the coefficients, or the numbers if you want to think of it that way. Multiply the numbers together. So 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. And then m to the 1 times m to the 0. Now don't get confused. There is no m here, so it's like m to the 0. If you add 1 and 0, you still get 1. Basically, if you don't see an m there, then you just keep whatever you've got. It's not gonna disappear or anything. So m to the first power, but we don't need to put the first power. So we can just write this as our answer. Okay, it's the same as the other side of the page, you're just doing it more times. Again, you're going to do it 3 times here. 1, 2, 3. So I'm not going to write down this middle step this time, I'm just going to go for it. So the first one, negative 5n squared times 3n squared. We multiply negative 5 times 3, which is negative 15. And then n squared times n squared. Oh, we keep the base the same and add the exponents. 2 plus 2 is 4. Next, negative 5n squared times negative 1n. So first of all, the numbers up front, the coefficients. Negative 5 times negative 1 is positive 5. And then n squared times n to the 1. We keep the base the same and add the 2 and the 1 and we get 3. Okay, now we do negative 5n squared times negative 6. Multiply the numbers. Negative 5 times negative 6 is positive. Two negatives make a positive. Positive 30. And then we have n squared times, well, there's nothing to multiply it by, so it just remains n squared. And that's it. A couple more and we're done. A lot of mountains in this one, isn't there? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mountains to go through here. Okay, I don't see a coefficient in front of this. What does that mean the coefficient is? 1. There's also, we can put 1s all over the place. A 1 on that b for the exponent, a 1 on that a 1 on that b, a 1 is the coefficient in front of this, a 1 is the coefficient in front of that, a 1 is the coefficient there, and a 1 is the exponent. I hope that all makes sense. If not, erase all the 1s and maybe that'll make it easier for you. But this is supposed to make it easier for you. Okay, first thing. A cubed b times negative 5ab. So we multiply the 1 times the negative 5 and we get negative 5. Now multiply the a's. A cubed times a to the 1. Keep the a the same. Add 3 and 1, you get 4. Then do the b's. B to the 1 times b to the 1. Add those b's, you get b to the 2. Okay, let's do the second one. So now we're multiplying by this. So 1 times 1 is 1, positive 1. A cubed times, oh, there's no a's here, so we just keep the a cubed. And then b to the 1 times b to the 2, keep the base the same, the b, and add 1 and 2, you get 3. Okay, we're now up to here. Do the same thing. Don't forget the negative in front of it as well. So you have 1 times negative 1, which is negative 1. A cubed times a to the 5th, keep it as an a and add the 3 and 5 and get 8. B to the 1 and b to the 3, add 1 and 3 and you get 4. Okay, moving along, we're up to here now. 1 times 1 is positive 1. A cubed, there is no more a's, so we just put a cubed again. B to the 1, there is no more b's, so we just put b again. And there is a c, so don't lose that c, you have to have that c as well. So then you have a c here. And finally, we're on to the last one, this negative 2. So 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. And then there's nothing else over here, so we can just rewrite the a cubed and the b1. Okay, great answer, right? There's nothing wrong with it. I'd give you full marks. But there is no need to put this 1 out here, this 1 here, and this 1 there. So I'm just going to simplify it to negative 5a to the 4th b squared plus just a cubed b cubed minus a to the 8th b to the 4th plus a cubed bc minus 2a cubed b. What an answer. Okay, last one, and not a lot of room to write it. So there's a couple things here. We have this negative out front, which confuses people. But what number, what coefficient could you write after that negative? You could make it negative 1. So it's kind of like negative 1, and then multiplied by a trinomial, and then multiplied by a monomial. But remember, even when we wrote this here, it says multiply the monomial in front. We'd like to have the monomial in front. So why don't we do that? Why don't we leave our negative 1, but move this monomial to the next position. Remember, when you multiply, order doesn't matter. We can write this in any order we want. So I'm going to keep the negative 1. That's what the negative is negative 1. Now I'm going to write this negative 5m6 to the n, and then I'll write my trinomial, 3m squared minus m plus 1. Okay, now, let's pause a second. When you multiply three numbers, like 2 times 3 times 4, how do you get the answer? You pick any two of them, probably the first two here, and you go 2 times 3 is 6, and then you multiply that answer by 4. What you don't do is do the distributive property or something here and go 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 4 is 8, and then multiply those together. No, you get this answer and then multiply by that answer. So people have this tendency when they do this to go negative 1 times the monomial and also negative 1 times the trinomial. No, what you should be doing here is multiplying any two together you want, but I'm going to multiply those two together. And then once I have that answer, I'll multiply it by the trinomial here. Okay? So let's start by doing this. Negative 1 times negative 5m6n. We'll multiply the coefficients, the negative 1 and the negative 5, and you get positive 5. And then you still have an m6 and an n. So leave that out front. That's your monomial. And what we still have is 3m squared minus m plus 1. And what we're going to do is now do the distributive property. Multiply here, multiply here, multiply here, and we'll be done. If you like adding your 1's in there, where would you have 1's? You'd have one here on the exponent, you'd have one here as a coefficient, and you'd have one here as an exponent. And now we're good to go. So the first one, we're multiplying 5m6n to the 1 times this right here, the 3m squared. 5 times 3 is 15. M to the 6 times m squared, keep the base of m the same and add 6 and 2 and get 8. And then you still have an n, so you just rewrite the n. Okay, now we're multiplying by negative 1m to the first power. So 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. M to the 6 times m to the 1, add 6 and 1 and you get m to the 7. And you still have an n, so we'll rewrite that. And finally, we're multiplying 5m6n times 1. Well, when you multiply anything by 1, it stays the same, so I sure hope we get this. But let's just make sure. 5 times 1 is 5. And then there's m6 and m1. There's nothing to multiply it with, so we just rewrite it. m6 and n1, but of course we don't need to put the 1. And there you go. That is how to multiply polynomials. I hope that makes sense. And if not, you know who to ask. Take care. Bye.